Welcome back once again. It's been a long time, but welcome back to the Paisan Sports Podcast. As you can see, brand new logo. Logo looks a lot better. And if you're wondering what all this backdrop is, we're now affiliated. We're affiliated with Elevation Sports. So we're back. We are with the media company. We got a new logo. Things are a bit different now in a good way. So welcome back.
Yes, sir. I'm happy to be back. Like we said, we're streaming with the platform of 5280 Elevation Sports. It's going to take a little bit getting used to saying that name, but I'm happy that we're partnering with them. And this is the first podcast in probably like 9, 10 months that we've done for Paisan Sports in total.
I'm gonna
So,
try and think back to the last time we actually did this podcast because I know we did the entire Eagles season, the entire 2022 Eagles season. Um, did we? We were during the podcast. We were doing the podcast while the Sixers were in the playoffs because I remember talking about how excited I was that we were up 3-2 on the Celtics. That didn't end well. And I don't think we went far after that, did we?
we had some time. We didn't talk at all about the Philly season. So,
Yeah, we weren't still doing it by the time the postseason rolled around. I think we stopped doing it during the summer.
yeah.
Yeah, because we
Or
were
right
we
around the
both
summer. So it's been quite some time, but we're happy to be back. Obviously, you got the duo of me and Dante back, and there's a decent amount of stuff to talk about in Philadelphia sports. So let's start off with the Philadelphia
what's happened.
76ers. So the Philadelphia 76ers, as it stands right now in the standings, are seventh. They're slated to be a play-in tournament game team. And there's
I hope
11
not.
games left in the season without their star player, Joel Embiid. And the funny thing is, when I was looking at the standings today, it's actually the three other teams that are slated to be in the play-in if the season ended today are teams that were in the play-in last season. And we obviously know how far the Heat ended up going, making it to the NBA Finals. So, yeah. What are your thoughts on the Philadelphia 76ers right now? Because, in my opinion, I think the Sixers are right on pace with what we would have expected a team without Joel Embiid would be. This time last year, they would have had been able to lean on James Harden. They played James Harden today, got a big W. Those are the type of games that are really crucial to win versus a team that you're not expected to win against. They were a 10-point spread underdog today, and they ended up winning. And they actually didn't trail at any point in the game. And that was the
Yeah,
first time this
first.
season without Joel Embiid that they didn't trail at all. So Dante, what are your thoughts on the Sixers? First, let's evaluate the Sixers without Joel Embiid in the current state of the Sixers.
Well, first I want to say, going back to what you were talking about standings, with them currently being a playing team. I really, really want them to finish as the sixth seed, not just to avoid the play-in tournament, but if they finish as the sixth seed, right, and they beat the Cavaliers, who that's who they would play right now, first round, and let's say the Bucks win their series against the seventh seed, that would mean the second round matchup would be Sixers versus Bucks, and I would love that. Because think about it, man. Who are the two people infamous for losing in the second round? Okay. You got the Philadelphia 76ers and you got Doc Rivers, right? So, I mean, one of us has to win the second round this time. And I'm telling you what, as little confidence as I've had in recent years of the Sixers making it out of the second round, I have even less confidence in Doc Rivers getting that done. I mean, this Clippers team, first of all, I forgot for a minute the Sixers were playing today, right? Usually, when the Sixers play during the week, it's usually when I get done work, I check my phone, see if they're playing that night, and I end up watching them. On a Sunday, it kind of just hits you out of nowhere, right? So it's like first quarter, we're up like what, 41-29. So in my head, I'm thinking like, okay, either PG's out, either Kawhi's out, James Harden's out. I go look at the box score. The entire big three is playing. And Doc Rivers just got his ass handed to him by the Tyrese Maxey, Cameron Payne, Kelly Oubre led 76ers at home. If wait, what am I
Well, you did
talking
say Doc
about?
Rivers. I was gonna correct you on Tyler, but I was gonna let you go off. But yeah, I actually expected the same thing. I knew they were playing a little bit earlier today, but it was hard to see that because they also did play the Lakers late the last game, so that was like a 10:30 start.
I think
But
I got confused for a second because Doc obviously also used to coach PG over in LA. But yeah, I mean Doc, the Sixers, they looked good tonight against a full squad of the LA Clippers at home nonetheless. And then you bring back Embiid, you face Doc Rivers, Mr. Choke Artist in the second round. I don't hate those odds, right? But now if you finish as like as the 7 seed, then you're going, I don't know, you're going up against them in the first round. It's like, meh. But or if you finish as the 8 seed, you have to play the Celtics first round. I like Bucks second round. I love that. Let's get that done. Um,
I don't know if this team is like if we could pencil in this team to actually make it out of the first round though, because we really have to see without Joel Embiid. Because the current state of the Sixers, I don't think they're winning any playoff series, and I just think
well, yeah,
without
the
Joel Embiid, they
current
obviously
state
run a lot of their offensive game without Joel Embiid, but defensively
without
without
Joel
Joel.
Embiid.
I think
Yeah,
they
those
just
are the
don't
key
have enough
words.
perimeter defenders to match up with a lot of these teams in the East. That's what scares me in any playoff series. And even if they face the Bucks, I know Doc Rivers has to do his thing, but you've seen how quickly the Bucks have ushered coaches out of there. And I don't know how much importance the Milwaukee players put on a head coach. Obviously, he runs plays and runs the system, but at the end of the day, Damian Lillard and Giannis are going to do their thing, and they've been playing without Chris Middleton for a long stretch of time. I think he was playing today, but they found ways to get past that. And they fired their coach, even with a really good record, who ended up coaching. Their coaching staff was supposed to coach the All Star game, and Doc Rivers ended up coaching the All Star game. So that just shows you how the Bucks have just kind of gone on and done what they've had to do. The players have to get to this point. So.
Look, that means absolutely nothing to me, and I'll tell you why. When Doc Rivers first signed here, right? I was one of the few people to not be excited by it, knowing his track record with the LA Clippers. That insane starting five plus the six man that he had during those years. With Chris Paul, JJ Redick, Matt Barnes, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, Jamal Crawford as the six man. I mean, that's a lethal group of six guys going into the playoffs, never made out of the second round. So when he signed here, I wasn't that confident. Then first season as head coach in Philly, the Sixers have the first seed. So I was thinking, okay, I mean, he never had the first seed in LA, so maybe it's going to be different this time. Goes in the playoffs, chokes against the Atlanta Hawks, you know. And then last year he's up 3-2 on the Celtics. He's got Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, James Harden, chokes again. I mean, the man is a choke artist, plain and simple. I don't care what's currently going on in the regular season. I don't care how good they look without this player, without that player. It doesn't matter. Doc is going to find a way to choke again. I can almost guarantee that. It's kind of like when the Dallas Cowboys have a great regular season, they go to the playoffs. Not a single ounce in my being is ever worried when the Dallas Cowboys are in the playoffs because they're going to find a way to choke. And Doc Rivers is going to do the same damn thing. I'm not worried at all. But
The only thing that I would say is, I mean, they pretty much do have the same core players at the top of the roster. The Bucks do. If we're going to talk about the Bucks, that they had during their championship year with some other supporting cast players mixed in there. Damian Lillard is the only one that hasn't really won on a high level yet in his career, and that's why he made his way over to Milwaukee and finally asked out of Portland after being so loyal to them. To it got to the point where fans were telling him that he needs to leave Portland. Even Portland fans were saying that. So, but I think we just got to look ahead to really just take it day by day, and the Sixers just have to keep on pace. They said Joel might be able to play the last week of the season, but is that going to be enough ramp up time for a guy like Joel Embiid? Because we've seen conditioning issues be a problem for him in the past, especially coming off an injury like he's coming off of. And we still don't know the severity of the injury. I think they're going to try and push him out there. But I think really when they traded James Harden to the Clippers and got the return that they got and didn't even get back a Paul George or even a Norman Powell, I think that kind of just showed the
Wait,
direction of
wait.
how the season was going to go.
Hold on a second, because now we did not have this podcast when this trade happened. And I never got your thoughts on it. You never got my thoughts on it. And let's just talk about this real quick, because let's not talk about a trade that transpired months ago. But I think it was a damn good trade. And I'll give you two reasons why. One, you have the two-star players that you need. You have Joel Embiid and you have Tyrese Maxey. So now, if you get back that return to load your team with some really fantastic depth, that which at the time was Nico Batum, Robert Covington, and Marcus Morris. I mean, that's really good. And now you flipped Marcus Morris for Buddy Hield, which, and even though one, Buddy Hield's a better player, two, it's a better fit because you don't need three wing players from one trade. So now you flip one for a sniper at the two guard position. I mean, they really loaded up with the proper pieces to surround Maxey and Embiid with, and then you take those guys in addition with Kelly Oubre, Kyle Lowry, not Tobias Harris, not Tobias Crumble Cookie Harris, but I think it was a fantastic trade in my eyes.
I think it just waited
And
too long to materialize. They could have got a better return, but we're so far into the season now that we can't really look back
well,
on that. Robert
yeah,
Covington's also been out. We're missing two other
he's
depth
been out
guys.
a
Robert
while. He's
Covington's been
been out
out.
a while.
D'Anthony
Yeah.
Melton's been out. I think they're a lot
Oh my
better
God,
too
I
with
forgot all
D'Anthony
about
Melton.
D'Anthony Melton. But the other thing too is all those contracts were expiring contracts, so it gives you the typically, I would say it gives you the option to sign someone big in free agency, but I do not like this free agent class very much, so maybe not. But yeah, I mean, and to answer your question about Joel Embiid coming back, is 1 week enough ramp up time? Honestly, I don't know. I hope it is, and I tell you what, if it is, then I'm not worried at all about who we play in the first round, unless it's the Celtics, because we can never beat them in the playoffs. But I mean, you saw in the regular season when Embiid was healthy and he was playing, it looked like there was not a single team in the NBA that could stop the
Well,
76ers.
that's what
So,
I'm not afraid of what he's gonna be able to produce when he comes back. I just am afraid of how long he's gonna be able to produce when he gets back. And,
yeah.
especially playing both sides of the court the way that he plays, I think that's where, um, the difference is. And like you said, they did get, back good role players. I wasn't expecting a star back. That was kinda getting greedy thinking that the Clippers would, give up a Kawhi, which would never happen. Paul George was more likely that wouldn't happen. We actually talked about that on the podcast, which was funny. I predicted that James Harden, when we were still doing the podcast back in the day, was going to get traded to the Clippers, but I thought they were going to be able to get a return of a Paul George, but that didn't materialize itself. But I just don't think they right now. It's just with Joel Embiid getting out, I think this team looks a lot different with those role players. But now they're just kind of a bunch of guys out there trying to find their way. They have good scoring. Their point differential is like fifth or sixth in the East. They score like 114 and give up 112. And a lot of that has been without Joel Embiid for the season. But I just don't know how much these guys are going to be able to give and what type of rotation. And if there's going to be enough time for Nick Nurse to find a good rotation of who's going to play in the playoffs, and how they're going to play it. I still don't like our backup center position. Mo Bamba's good some nights. Some nights he is kind of missing. Paul Reed, I just still feel like if Joel's not able to go, he's just not. I mean, he's listed at a small forward and he's forced to play the center position. You know what I mean? That just tells you what you need to see right there. And I just don't think their defense is going to be enough to be able to stop teams when it comes that time with all the stars, because there's a lot of stars now in the East, especially with that Damian Lillard trade. So I think as of now, I think they're looking forward to next season and what they can do, especially with those expiring contracts. And like I said, trading that James Harden trade that happened months and months ago, I think that kind of just told you that we're going to try and long play it and see what happens. So I don't really expect or have that many expectations for them in this season. And I feel like that's very fair to say because of the injury to arguably the best player in the entire league in Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's very fair to say that you have low expectations come playoff time. Um, all I know is if Embiid gets back to being the Embiid he was during the regular season, I mean, he was looking even better than MVP Joel from last year. So if he gets back to that, I think they have a pretty good chance in the playoffs, but that's an if. He's coming off an injury. There's still a lot to be seen, and there is a lot of potential for next season as well. Tobias Harris, his contract
I
finally
don't think
ends.
there's any chance he comes back either.
No, he better not. He better
There's
not
not even
come
like
back.
it's to the point now where he has games like he played well today, but then there's other games where he's literally can't make a shot. He's scoring 8 points. There should be no game in the season where Tobias Harris, he should be honestly leading the way even more so than Tyrese Maxey has, because he's been in Philadelphia longer than Tyrese Maxey. He should be able to take the Honus on and realize that he's the leader of the team. And that's crazy to say Tobias Harris is the leader of the team, but I mean, he's one of the longest tenured guys that's been in Philadelphia. And he's a guy that they're paying so much money to that he has to give you at least 15 a game. And I don't know if
I
he's
think
capable of that. And he's just so spurty.
I think Tobias Harris is one of those cases where they age too quickly. I mean, Tobias Harris for his age, he just looks like he's just aged too much. I mean, he looks slow out there on the court nowadays. He does not look like the Tobias Harris that we traded for 5 years ago. I mean, back then, I think he was a much better player at the time. Now he just looks slow. He can't really get open himself. He's a good when Embiid's here and he's playing. I think he's a decent complementary piece to Joel Embiid because Embiid, attracts so much attention inside of the paint. I think he's a good complementary piece to that. It's certainly not worth $40 million, however, but without Embiid here attracting all the attention, he just looks lost out there. And yeah, I would not bring him back next year. And I am so excited to finally get rid of his contract. I've been saying for the past 5 years because I've been fighting with, my brother and my cousin in the group chat who have been saying trade Embiid. He can't get you to the finals. I've been saying this whole time, just wait. Just wait to see. We need to at least wait and see what he can do when he doesn't have a player like Tobias Harris on his team taking up a max contract, because you're basically playing shorthanded at that point. You have all these other teams where if they have 3 max contracts on their team, it's 3 max contract players, like the LA Clippers, right? Um, Although I don't know if they're the best example, they just lost us, but the point is, so I just want to see what Embiid can get done when that money that's tied up currently in Tobias Harris is being more so properly used. And then you can, take things from there. But I think it
I think
would be
they might be a little shell shocked from the Tobias Harris thing, and they might go the route of trying to get proven role players that do a specific trait to build around Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to get better at perimeter defense, like I keep mentioning, because Tyrese Maxey, that's the liability of his game, is where he's just not the biggest guy in the world. It's not like he doesn't show effort. He's just not the biggest guy in the world. And Robert Covington could be playing that role, but we haven't seen Robert Covington in I don't know how many months.
Well,
So,
yeah,
and he's
that's
also getting up there in age. I'm not putting all this like, oh, Robert Covington's going to stop this dude or whatever, but he's definitely a body that you can throw out in a playoff rotation if he's healthy and stop and get better defense than what they're getting out there. But um, at the end of all this Sixers talk, because we're going to segue into some Eagles talk. But at the end of the day, if we're being honest, I think if the Sixers win a playoff series in the first round this year, this specific year, I think that's the expectation, not the expectation. That would be a plus. Just the way that
I wouldn't consider just a round one victory a plus. I would say a round two victory. That would
well, you
be
got
a
to just
plus.
look at the timeline of where they were going before they traded James Harden, what they had on the roster to end last season, the way last season ended and the previous years ended with all those second round exits, and what's transpired this year, and all the turnover on the roster and everything. I think at the end of the day, that it would be a plus for them to win a playoff series. But we're talking about money. You just brought up how the Sixers can allocate money. Let's talk about some of the moves that the Philadelphia Eagles have made in free agency.
And they're
Let's start
still
with the
rich. And they're still rich. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah.
But I don't get
But
it. Go ahead.
first player we're going to talk about, Saquon Barkley. Do you like the Saquon Barkley signing? Not the player itself, but what do you think allocating that money to a running back means for the Philadelphia Eagles?
I mean, I love it. I think it's going to be very similar to Christian McCaffrey joining the 49ers and to all those Giants fans pointing out his total yards and his yards per carry. I mean, that was behind the worst offensive line in football. And now he's going to possibly the best offensive line in football. 1 year ago, yes, the best. We got to see how it looks with Cam Jurgens at center, who I think is actually going to look damn good. Jason Kelsey said he's the next best thing to him. And we got to see about Tyler Steen at right guard. But I have full confidence in Stoutland University, and I have full confidence on Saquon Barkley behind that offensive line.
That's what I hope that they end up doing, but I wouldn't be surprised if somehow Matt Hennessy ends up the starting center and they kept
No,
Jurgens at right guard. I mean,
come
he
on.
started 22 games. It's not like the worst idea, but you would like for them to actually develop their
Yeah,
draft
but I
picks and
mean,
be able to have Tyler Steen play a role for that offense.
yeah, I mean, they drafted him in the second round last year. You know, if you draft somebody that high, you draft them that high for a reason. And it's not like other positions where maybe you draft a safety second round. He doesn't start the first year because you got other guys starting, but he doesn't really look that good in training camp. You know, we're talking about an offensive lineman on the Eagles. We're talking about he's getting coached by Jeff Stoutland. Um, unless you're Andre Dillard or Jamon Brown, you're going to be successful with Jeff Stoutland as your offensive line coach, or Hal Vaitai. Those are only three examples that I can even think
He
of.
still got
But
paid. I think he got when he left Philadelphia, what he signed with the Lions,
he
like
signed with
3
the
years,
Lions.
30
Yeah, they give
million.
him a lot of money.
It was like 3 years, 30 million, which was crazy. Andre Dillard
I know they give
got a
him a
big
lot.
contract too when he ended up leaving after he got traded. He got a big free agency contract and he just got released off that contract. So, um,
Yeah.
if we're staying on the offensive side of the ball, they also signed two wide receivers. Devontae Parker, who creates no separation, had the lowest separation rate of wide receivers that could be calculated over the past 4 seasons. I think that might be somebody that just gets cut at the end of training camp. And even more so with Paris Campbell signing, who I like Paris Campbell, who was with Nick Sirianni in Indianapolis. I'm not saying Paris Campbell's like going to be a number one or number two receiver. We already know who that's going to be for the Philadelphia Eagles. But as a third body, I think he could be somebody that can come in and create some plays for them. And you already saw Zacchaeus even made some plays last year. I think
Zacchaeus.
Zacchaeus, whatever you want to say, but he even made some plays last year uh, on plays that were created from Jalen Hurts. So I don't look too far into those two signings, but I think it adds good depth to the Eagles. And it's not like they forged a bill that they can't pay. They still have a lot of money to work with, tops in the league. Not the top, but they're still around the top in the league with money to work with. And that just shows the wizardry of Howie Roseman and how he's able to handle money. So We're also going to look at the defensive side of the ball. Our boy CJ Gardner Johnson is back. How do you feel about it? Be honest too. Let's not just be hopeful and say this is the same guy that had 6 picks in limited action, because he did miss the stretch. Him and Jalen missed the end of the 2022 season, a bunch of games, and their impacts were felt when they had that rough stretch at the very end of the regular season where they lost to the Saints and they lost to the Cowboys. But he's definitely somebody that is going to improve their safety depth, and the Kevin Byard thing definitely didn't work out. I mean, he was not even close to the same ball hawking safety that he once was with the Tennessee Titans. They got themselves out of that contract, and they replaced him with a younger guy who has familiarity in Philadelphia, playing the one season a couple years ago in Philadelphia. So, how do you feel about the CJ Gardner Johnson signing?
I feel relieved. Um, Anybody who knows me personally, I think I might have mentioned this on the podcast. I know I've posted this story to my TikTok account, but if you know, I took some of the burden of responsibility when CJ Gardner Johnson signed elsewhere due to an altercation with that I had with him on Broad Street, where I offered him a white claw. He got spooked, sped away in his SUV. So,
Maybe he's a high noon guy.
maybe that's what it is. And then he was even on a podcast or a live stream, and he said, Eagles fans are obnoxious. And I'm thinking maybe he's talking about me. Maybe he
Or
thought I was
maybe
being
he's also
obnoxious.
talking about the person that stole his
No, no,
car.
no, 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 because that's not obnoxious. But you don't
That's
get your
outrageous.
car
Is that more
stolen.
outrageous than
You
obnoxious?
you don't get your car stolen and then go, "Oh, man, that is just so obnoxious." No, you say, "Oh, man, that is messed up." It's not obnoxious. It's just messed up. Obnoxious is a drunk fan, yo, "Oh, you want a White Claw?" That's more obnoxious. So, I was worried the whole time, I might be the reason CJ Gardner Johnson is over there in Detroit, but he's back in Philly. So a weight has been lifted off my shoulder. But in all seriousness, in terms of what this means for the Eagles, I think it means a whole lot. I mean, you had just about nobody at the safety position. So you bring back a guy who can play it well, CJ Gardner Johnson, and then you can yet let a young guy like Sidney Brown kind of come into his own while he has help from a very well veteran safety.
Yeah, well, I hope City Brown recovers from that injury. That was unfortunate that that happened that late into the season too, because that
Yeah.
might take some time away from this season. But if that would be a good pairing if possible to make that happen. They do have CJ Gardner Johnson. They listed him originally at corner. I haven't checked if that's changed at all, so maybe they might be slotting him to play in the slot. But they got to find some way to use James Bradbury, and I think it might be able to be used in the slot, because they have to find some way. You're not just going to have him sitting on the roster doing nothing. I just don't think that makes sense. And it was funny because last year they had to make the decision of the three secondary in free agency before free agency started, who they were going to save. They ended up signing Darius Slay, and they gave James Bradbury his money as well. CJ walked, and then he's back, so they ended up with all three. And I think it would just be a little bit over eager to think that all three of them were going to work out being signed back to the roster. And we've seen that James Bradbury has aged tremendously, even from the Bills game last year where we had that interception. Just from that point on, it looked like he was just an entirely different player. The Seahawks game was horrible, gives up that late touchdown, not even close. It just looks like he was like an unexperienced corner. I do like Keeley Ringo a lot. Isaiah Rodgers is coming off the suspension, so they do have a lot of options at corner. But I think they're going to find some way to get James Bradbury in the mix there and somehow use him. We also had a couple retirements on our hands too. I'm going to get to the Devin White signing in a little bit,
Well,
but on the
well,
defensive
before we
side of the
get
ball,
to that, I definitely want to give my thoughts on James Bradbury, man. I wish they would get rid of him. It doesn't seem like they have any plans to get rid of him, but I really wish they would. I mean, James Bradbury last year was one of those cases where, you have a star-studded corner like James Bradbury, like how good he was in 2022. I mean, he was really good in 2022. And then as soon as they hit 30, they completely drop off. I mean, you saw it happen with Darrelle Revis. He was a absolute lockdown, legendary corner. And then as soon as he hit age 30, it might have been age 31, but as soon as he hit age 30, he was just awful that year, if you remember correctly. I mean, he was really, really bad. And you've kind of seen the same thing with James Bradberry, not to compare James Bradberry to Darrelle Revis, but
Yeah, I was about to
it's
say.
just, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, don't get me wrong, Darrelle Revis was a far better corner than James Bradberry was at his peak. Not to discount Bradberry, he was a terrific corner, but my point is that just sudden drop off once they hit 30. I mean, it was just very similar to that. So,
But
and
also, I feel like a lot of the isolation of that too was it was the end of the season, and I think so many things went wrong when they changed defensive coordinators that I think a lot of that is tied to that. And you also have to tip your cap to the Giants released James Bradberry because he looked like he was kind of tailing off, and he had a great season with the Eagles, and Shane Steichen was calling plays at that point and got them to the Super Bowl. Obviously didn't have the greatest Super Bowl or playing against the greatest quarterback of the generation, but I think a lot of that had to do with the X's and O's of the defense and how it was
yeah,
called as well.
and that's why, like, part of me is hoping, with a new defensive coordinator, with him having some better safety help over the top, with CJ Gardner Johnson now being back. Part of me is hoping he can not even return to 2022 James Bradbury, but just be, serviceable and not the worst corner in all of football. Part of me is hoping that, but then, the other part of me is thinking maybe he's just old now. And so, and that's the other thing too, is with all these moves the Eagles have made in free agency, and they've made some good moves, right? It's a lot to be excited about, but then you stop and you're like, wait a minute, James Bradbury is still a starting corner on this team. And
Well, I don't
to
think
me,
it's locked in that he's a starting corner. I think the expectation is that he's going to have a chance, but they do have a lot of resources invested
but with
into
how
the
much
cornerback
money they're
position.
paying him, but with how much money they're paying
Yeah,
him,
that's what I'm saying. That's why he's gonna have a chance to fight for that role, but I think the
I,
only lock to start in the secondary is Slay, and I think they are low-key pretty high on Ringo as well because they played him a lot down the stretch last season. I think he has a lot of good traits, and if you can hit
I
on
like
a
Ringo a
4th
lot.
round pick like that and, somebody that is his size with a combination of size and speed and plays the way that he does, if he can get back to his, ball hawking days with, Georgia Bulldogs, then, that would be, you're just anointing from within, and that would be really good for them. So we also ended up the Eagles signed Bryce Huff in free agency. This is one signing I wasn't that high on. I think he's a good pass rusher, but if this means that Hassan Reddick's going to get traded, I do not like this move at all. How do you feel about that situation?
I mean, I'm actually with you 100% on that. I think if Hassan Reddick stays, I think it's a very good signing.
I think it's a phenomenal signing under that case, even
Yeah,
though it still is a lot of money for a rotational piece. But at the
yeah.
end of the
I
day, if
mean,
this means that you're replacing Hassan Reddick with Bryce Huff just based off of age and potential, because this was a guy that didn't even hit double-digit sacks until this season, has only played a percentage of the snaps in a loaded defense. So I don't think by any stretch of the imagination anybody would say, even though there's some notable names on that side of the ball, until we see it materialize on paper, they look like they got a lot better. But this team's defense is not as good as the New York Jets defense at this moment. So if this means that Hassan Reddick or Josh Sweat, which they were shopping around, but he ended up restructuring his contract, which I was happy about, there's no reason to trade somebody like that. Hassan Reddick, even though he's unhappy with the Eagles, I think even if they ride it out for one more year and don't pay him and ended up just saying, all right, well, you're going to play on this contract and play on the end of your contract, I think that would still be a plus for the Eagles, and that would make their defensive core a lot. Because as much as I love Brandon Graham and him signing back in Philadelphia, and they needed him to come back just based off the leadership that they lost with Fletcher Cox retiring, which also with Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox retiring opened up some money to make these moves. They needed that leadership because there's a lot of young guys in there, and I don't know if Slay, as much as I appreciate Slay for his play on the field and what he brings to the Eagles, I don't know if he is somebody with his solo voice alone is somebody that can keep the things to keep everything together and be the glue that this defense needs when things go awry.
Yeah, um, that's the thing. I think, bringing back BG is more of let's keep a veteran presence in this locker room. Let's keep, part of the heart and soul of this team in this locker room. I think the heart and souls of the team were Jason Kelsey and Brandon Graham collectively. So let's hold on to at least one of them for one more year. But I mean, I think you'll still get some use out of Brandon Graham as well. He definitely seems like he still has a good bit left in the tank. And I think with Fletcher Cox being gone, and if they hold on to, Hassan Reddick, Huff, and Josh Sweat, and let's not forget Nolan Smith, then I think with all those edge rushers you have and with Fletcher Cox being gone, I think maybe you'll see a bit more of Brandon Graham working inside
There you go.
again. I think so I think that would actually be a pretty
Because
big
I think
need on third downs. Have, a rotation out there of Jalen Carter, and Brandon Graham inside with whomever you got rushing on the outside. So I think that is a valuable move to keep him from that standpoint, because Jordan Davis isn't really like a third down pass rusher.
no. He's more of a two
And
down guy. And also I really like Milton Williams, and I feel like a lot of Eagles
yeah,
fans
I
can
was
attest
about
to
to
that too.
say
Milton
his
Williams
name as well.
is a really good player, and I think he's going to step up in a different role with more playing time and showcase. That's another draft pick that they hit on. I think he was a third round pick, if I believe correctly, and he's just somebody that's been
He
getting
was
better every
was
single
he
year.
that high?
I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Hold on. I don't remember him being that high. I remember him being like a third or I mean a fourth or a fifth round pick. I'm very curious now. He was drafted um I can't see anything with him. Yeah, third round, pick 73. Wow, I do not remember him being that high.
Yes, sir. So I think with those guys and the arsenal of the guys, but if they let one of those guys go, which the likely candidate would be Hassan Reddick, then I don't like the rotation nearly as much as I like it at the current state that it is right now. And talking about those retirements, I think the only plus of the retirements of Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox were that it freed up some money to be able to make a lot of these signings like we talked about. But they
Yeah.
also made some other moves. Linebacker has been a position that the Eagles have just not invested in at all, and they just haven't been able to find anything that works. Nakobe Dean was a third round pick, and a lot of teams were down on him because of his medical history, which is showing now that it might be a true thing, that he's just not fit to play at the NFL level. Somebody was saying all that. I'm somebody that has always been high on Nakobe Dean. That was one of my favorite draft picks in recent memory, and Eagles recent memory. But I don't know if I can still hold on to that going into year 3 now, and him not being able to stay on the field and prove that he can be the starting linebacker.
I
So
gotta
they went.
disagree with you. Hold on, because I gotta disagree with you there. I mean, you're talking about going into year 3, but year 1 was basically a wash. They never really intended on playing him year 1. He didn't really see much of the field, not because of injuries, not because of lack of skill, just because that's usually how the Eagles operate. They draft a guy, they let him sit for a year while they have other starters, veteran guys that they value ahead of that. I mean, you saw that with Josh Sweat. They drafted him with no intention on playing him his rookie year. He didn't really play his rookie year because you had other veteran guys in there. And ever since then, he's been phenomenal. So, first year for Nakobe Dean, I look as that as a wash. Year 2, he got a little banged up with injuries, but I mean that's really his first year of trying to stay on the field, right? So I don't really put too much stock into that. I and if you want to talk about his level of play on the field, I don't think he looked bad. He basically was a rookie. I think now year 3, more so kind of year 2 for him. I think now is when we're really going to see what he's capable of, especially since now he gets to start alongside Devin White. So I think this year for Nakobe Dean, I'm a little excited to see Nakobe Dean play this upcoming season.
Yeah, I hope he carves out that role, and I don't know if he's even going to be given the starting linebacker role. I wouldn't even be surprised if they
He
brought back.
absolutely will. Who
Well, I
would
mean, I
get
don't
it
think it's
over
going to be
him?
given to him. I think he's definitely got the
I
work
don't
in
think it's
camp.
going to
I
be
think
given to him. I think he'll have to compete for it, but I don't see anybody on this Eagles roster beating him out for that starting job
Well,
alongside
I wouldn't
Devin
roll
White.
out Zach Cunningham coming back, and I'm not the highest on Zach Cunningham saying he's a franchise player, he's a franchise linebacker, this, that, the other, but he's somebody that has familiarity with the Eagles, showed the role that he could play. He wasn't superb, but he was above average for the expectations of signing him that late into before the season started, and played pretty well for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went out and did that. They also got Zach Bond. I don't think Zach Bond's going to beat Nakobe Dean out. For the starting job,
I
but I
don't
think
put
he
much
might be able
stock
to
into
rotationally
Vaughn.
work in and be a good special teams guy. So, but I really
Yeah,
like the
Vaughn
Devin White
is
signing.
he's more of a special teams guy.
He has some
And
versatility though. It's not like he's great at anything that he does, but he can do a little bit of everything. He can pass rush a little bit. He's had some interceptions versus good quarterbacks. Um, he hasn't been able to show everything that he's able to do coming over from the Saints. So I wouldn't be surprised if he flashes a couple times this season. But I really like Devin White. Um, and it's not even more so saying that Devin White's the same Devin White that was from the past, but he's still young enough to get back to being that Devin White. I don't know
absolutely.
100% back to that Devin White, but he's something that the Eagles just haven't had at linebacker with that type of athleticism and playmaking in quite some time. And I feel like him getting kind of benched at the end of the season with the Bucs was a little bit alarming, but I also think that there's an overemphasis since Todd Bowles is such an intense defensive coach of what he was expecting, and having Levante David out there, that was kind of the fishnet that was cast out there, that if you're not up to standard, we still have Levante David that's going to make plays out there. So we're not worried about having you out there if you're not going to listen to the assignments of what you have to do. So hopefully he stays on point and everything is clear with what Vic Fangio wants to do with the defense. And I think there's going to be a lot more clarity, and there's going to be a lot more organization of what the Eagles are trying to do on defense, as opposed to switching coordinators, which is just absolutely absurd midseason to do. Not even
Yeah,
midseason. We're talking about that late into the season and do all that. And you saw the collapse and the impact that it had on the defense as a whole. So
I think now, real quick before we move on from the Eagles, I think what they did this offseason, bringing in two veteran coordinators in Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, who have proven themselves in the past. I think that was the right move. I think it's time to stop experimenting with these young coordinators, these Brian Johnsons, these Sean Desai's, which, by the way, I gotta call you out. I gotta call you out a little bit. We were on this podcast when we signed Sean Desai. You were pretty high on him. You were pretty high on him. I haven't forgotten. So I'll pull up the clips. I'll go back. I'll go to the
you
archives.
got
I'll
to pull
pull
up
up the
those clips because
clips.
I don't remember
You
that
were you were
specifically, but
high on Sean Desai, man. You were pretty high on
high on
him.
Sean
But
Desai.
that's
I don't know if that's
that's
ever been.
that's neither here nor there. But I do think it's a great move to bring in two veteran coordinators who have proven themselves before. But to move on from some Eagles talk, it is time for me to once again the long awaited return of my meatball of the week. My meatball of the week is I don't know if I'm saying his name right or not. Igor, you're the MMA guy. Is it Igor? Igor?
I was actually, that's funny because I was gonna mix that in. Like I'm actually wearing a UFC shirt right here. So I was actually gonna mix that in. But yeah, I'm not sure how to pronounce that name as
I
well.
think it's Igor. Anyway, he's my meatball of the week. He bit a guy. He bit a guy. He left a bite mark in the guy's bicep, got disqualified. Not only did he get disqualified, he got kicked out of the UFC just instantaneous.
That
Like
was,
Dana
yeah, he
White.
actually got terminated from the contract before
Yeah,
the card even ended. He got terminated from the contract before the main card even started last night. And it was funny because I was watching that fight, and the fighter that it happened to thought that his thought that the fence like came loose and was poking him. That's what he thought happened, and it ended up being that he bit down, somehow found a way and managed to bite down with the mouth guard in his mouth and leave that mark, and it's a disqualification, and he was undefeated up until that point, and
yeah. He
he
was
basically
Wait, no,
lost the
wasn't
opportunity of a
he?
lifetime.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. He was 8-0. They were both yeah, he was 8-0 going into that fight. Now he's 8-1 and he's out of the UFC. And meanwhile, the guy he bit has now got I don't know if you saw it, but he's now gotten it tattooed on his arm.
Yeah,
He had
and
them
he got an
tattooed
extra
the bite mark.
25K for that tattoo. So I don't know how much he paid for the tattoo, but Dana was gonna give him 25K for the bite of the night, the first ever UFC bite of the night award. But he ended up getting 50K for his showmanship of getting that tattooed on him. So that's a memory that's gonna last a lifetime for him.
Yeah,
Got the
shout out to him.
victory, and it was a pretty close fight up until that point too. So I mean,
Yeah, I didn't actually see the fight, but I did hear it was a close fight. I heard he was actually kind of winning.
Yeah,
And
they were
then
tied up, and
so
he was in a favorable position. He was about to get taken down though at that point in the fight, and yeah, sunk down on some human flesh, which which was pretty crazy. So I haven't seen that in all the UFC fights I've watched in the past 4 to 5 years. But
I think
there's a
he got
first
a
time for
little
everything.
too I think he got a little too hype about, the upcoming Mike Tyson fight. He was
Or maybe that weight cut
trying
was
to
so
emulate
bad
him.
that he was really hungry and he was just cutting weight for too long, and he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna take a little snack mid
You
fight,"
know what? I've seen how these fighters what they go through to cut weight. I wouldn't be all that surprised. But let's move on now. Let's to wrap things up. Let's talk about some Philadelphia Phillies. They did pretty much nothing in free agency, rather other than sign Whit Merrifield at the very end there.
which I
Um,
really like.
yeah, I think he's definitely a good signing. For a utility guy, you're gonna bring off the bench year round, and
It's, pretty rare that you're able to sign a guy as a utility guy that's coming off an all-star season too. That's what's, the most impressive about the move itself. And he's
yeah,
not gonna, take time away from Bryson Stott, but they're gonna be able to work him around in different areas, and his versatility is what's key. So that's definitely somebody that you wanna have on your roster, and, he took less money, and, he just wanted to play at Citizens Bank Park. That's what he said when he signed there, so that was a really good
I don't
signing. I
blame
mean, the
him.
way that the Phillies spent money the past couple of years, you couldn't expect them to go out and get one of these major free agents, even though people are still talking about the Jordan Montgomery potential signing and what they could have done if they could have signed Blake Snell, who only got 2 years, but it was 62 million. So the pitching rotation's a little bit sketchier now. Taiwan
I don't
Walker
like it. I do
is
not like this pitching
he's
rotation, man.
experiencing some inflammation, I think, in his elbow, I think they said, or somewhere on his throwing arm. And he did not look good in his last spring training outing. I'm not the highest on Taiwan Walker. I think I was telling you last time we did the
I'm
podcast
not
that
high on him at all after what I saw from him this past season. I am not the slightest bit high on
he
him.
did end up with
I'm
what? It was like 15 wins last season though, which was pretty impressive, but
Yeah, I mean, he got a ton of run support. That happens
he's
sometimes with
definitely an
pitchers.
above average pitcher, but he's not worth the amount of
I would
money, and
say
it just
he's
shows.
slightly above average. I would say slightly above average. I'm not high on Spencer Turnbull, who that's actually the other signing the Phillies have made. I'm not fully high on Aaron Nola. I mean, maybe he can get back to how he was performing before last season. I think he might be able to. I do have confidence in him in the postseason. Um, the only guy I'm like truly high on, actually, no, the only two guys I'm truly high on in this starting rotation are Zach Wheeler and Ranger Suarez. Those are the two guys I like. Everyone else, I mean, I like Aaron Nola. He worries me a bit, and then the rest, I think it's just a crapshoot.
I
I
think if
really
Ranger
look.
wasn't in the rotation, there would have been more likely of a chance for them to sign the lefty Blake Snell, but that obviously didn't happen. I like the progression of Ranger Suarez as it's been. Obviously, he's pitched really well in the playoffs too, and in different roles as a long reliever and a starting pitcher. Aaron Nola as your two, you're going to take that every single day of the week. I don't think he's a number one, but he's right on the threshold of being a number one. He was more so a number one before Zach Wheeler got there. And then obviously Zach Wheeler has taken that reign over. Zach Wheeler is pretty much consensuously considered one of the top five pitchers in the entire MLB. And I'm glad that they signed a contract extension to him. They locked him and Aaron Nola up this offseason. So they kind of, did some moves to keep their core, and they like it. And did you know that the MLB.com actually rated the Phillies bullpen as the number one bullpen in the
I
entire
don't
major
know
league?
how. Yeah,
I
I
think it's
saw
pretty
that
crazy,
on
to be honest.
Twitter. I saw that on Twitter. I don't get it. I don't really like our bullpen. I mean, I like a few guys. I like Jose Alvarado. I like Sir Anthony Dominguez. One guy I'm actually really excited to see this upcoming season is, and this I've never known if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Speaking of that, is Orion Kirkering. I know his last name is pronounced Kirkering. Is his first name Orion? I don't know, but I am very excited to see more of Kirkering. He got lit up a bit in the postseason, but I mean, come on, he was a rookie reliever who had just came up to the majors not even a month before the
Yeah.
postseason. I don't fault him at all. And when we saw him in the regular season towards the end, he looked lights out.
Yeah, he looked
I'm at
really good at the end of the season,
Yeah,
and I don't think they got the best out of Gregory Soto, last season, so if, he can get better, he's still young, he's around the same age as Ranger Suarez, so if he can, be better than he was last year, I think their bullpen is pretty good, but I feel like the bullpen, that situation could a lot of it could be tied to, deadline moves. Obviously, we can't look at the deadline this early, but, that's where you can really, implement some moves to make. And there's still, Jordan Montgomery's still not signed, so you never know what teams are going to
yeah,
do out there. I wouldn't be surprised if the Phillies pulled the trigger because they haven't. Dave Dombrowski hasn't been scared to spend money, but it's in all likeliness to start the season he's not going to be on the roster, and I'm not sure if he's ever going to be on the roster. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Phillies, if they really don't feel confident in this, that, the other. But I think that move would have already been made if they were really sold on Jordan Montgomery. And I'm not the most sold on Jordan Montgomery. I mean, maybe a 1 year or 2 year deal, but I want to give him a crazy deal by any stretch of the imagination, just to get him on the roster and just to please him. Because I mean, no other team is jumping the gun to go get him on the roster. So that kind of just tells you right there. I mean, he's definitely a very good pitcher, but um, you know, I think a lot of teams are set with the roster and they're going to play it out and see how it
yeah.
goes.
I think there's two important questions to ask about the Phillies before we wrap things up here. My first question is Pache or Rojas?
I like Pache's bat a lot more. Rojas is obviously a superb defender, but I don't want Brandon Marsh to get lost in the mix.
Well, Marsh is going to be starting in left. You're going to
Yeah,
have
and then you have Whit Merrifield that can play outfield too. So it's going to be
yeah.
interesting how they platoon all those guys out there. Obviously, Kyle Schwarber's probably never going to see another day in the outfield. He's going to
I
be the
hope to
designated
God
DH.
not. I
I mean,
hope
at
to
the end of the
God
day,
not.
I mean,
Oh my
Alec
God.
Bohm can play first base if there's having big time issues. Bryce could always go back there, even though if that happened, all the Bryce Hoskins super fans would be going berserk because that would mean that he's off the roster and then you're moving all a bunch of different pieces around. But they have a lot of versatility on this roster, which makes it, and even Trey Turner can play outfield too. So I'm not saying
Yeah,
that's ever going to
that's the
happen,
thing.
but
So you have Bryce Harper, who's now playing first base. That's versatility right there because you have him playing first base, but you can also play the outfield. You have Trey Turner, who could possibly play the outfield if you need him. And then even Nick Castellanos has played third base in the past. He didn't play at third base for very long, but in terms of, Pache versus Rojas, a lot of people are saying basically what you're saying, Pache has a better bat. Rojas doesn't have much offense. He's just great in the outfield. I mean, I think people are forgetting Rojas batted 302 his rookie season. I think sometimes people put too much stock into spring training. I personally don't put much of any stock into spring training. I mean, you look at the spring training Mickey Moniak had a couple years ago, and everybody thought he was finally going to
yeah.
be a good
Jay
outfielder
Cave's
for
another
us.
one. Scott
Yeah,
Kingery, who they
Jake
gave that
Cave,
contract
Scott
to.
Kingery. I mean, come on. I'm tired of seeing, the spring training unfold. We all give our opinions on this player, that player, based on how they're performing in spring training. And then regular season comes along and it plays no factor into it whatsoever. So I'm putting more stock into the fact that Rojas batted 302 in the regular season last year and that he batted well in the minors over, his batting average in spring training or in the postseason, where same thing as Kirkering, he's a rookie competing in the postseason. So I think Rojas has a pretty solid bat. Obviously, he doesn't hit for much power. I think he's going to hit for a little more power because if you've seen the guy's absolutely jacked now. But personally, I like Pache too, though. That's the
But
thing.
also, we shouldn't get into a situation. I know it happened in the playoffs last year of like real situationally with the bases loaded. They could have pinch hit for him, and they ended up not doing that, which I could argue might be even worse than the Craig Kimbrell situation of bringing him in that game. You know what I mean? It's like those were the two biggest points of the season where the direction kind of turned and they just didn't make the right managerial move. But at the end of the day, they shouldn't have to rely on a Johan Rojas bat. You know what I mean? They have so much offense loaded
Yeah,
into this lineup, so it should never come down to a situation where Rojas
absolutely.
has to step up. Because look how many dry bats happened at the end of those series. Bryce wasn't on. Trey Turner wasn't really doing his thing. Kyle Schwarber really wasn't doing his thing. At the end of that Arizona series, they just really just their bats got dry. Castellanos was
It
still
looked like
swinging
they
at those
gave up.
sliders.
It looked like they gave up, and because of that, for about I don't know 5 months, I couldn't even look at it baseball. I was so mad at the Phillies.
Yeah, it was a big missed opportunity, especially because it was
It was
regression
horrible.
from the last season. It looked like they had it locked
Yeah,
up, and that was a way easier path and road. And I always say this, and I know it's a cliche to say, but I've been saying this since they beat the Braves in the playoffs last season. How many times are you going to beat the Braves in the playoffs and not win a World Series? You know what I mean? You're already beating arguably the best team in baseball. You did it back to back years. Can we expect that for a third season? We already have trouble winning the NL East
holy.
title. I don't know if it's favorable for us to assume that they're going to be able to beat the Braves in a playoff series
Does this
again.
make us the Boston Celtics of the
Mm,
MLB? I mean,
it
all
could
we
be.
do is beat up on our rival in the postseason, and then we don't win at all. And when was our last ring? Oh, wait, same thing as the
That's funny. I
Celtics.
didn't even make that connection. That's
Yeah,
funny.
I think we unfortunately might be
That's
the
fair enough
Boston
to say as of
Celtics
right now.
of
I
the
guess that is fair
MLB.
enough to say. But before we get out of
Um,
here, I'm going to give you a
what oh, I have my other question real quick. I'll give it to you real fast.
what we
What's your
got?
prediction for the Phillies this season?
All right, well, that actually ties into what we're going to talk about. So we'll start there.
Okay.
We're going to do some Paisan picks over under. All you got to say is over or under when I read it to you. We're both going to go, and it's just going to be a fast, over under. So
Okay.
since you said the expectations for the Philly season, I'm going to have to go reverse order of my list here. So these are all bets and player props and season props based off of DraftKings Sportsbook. So starting off, Phillies over under 89.5 wins.
Under.
I'm going to go over, but slightly over, like 91.
I'm gonna go slightly under because I think the offense is gonna be phenomenal, but I have zero confidence in the pitching.
So that would also mean that you think they're going to lose the NL East. I should more say not win the NL East because the Braves are most likely going to win over
Yeah,
90.
no,
I
I
mean,
think they'll be a wild card team again.
okay. So now we're going to get to the player props. Bryce over under 30.5 home runs.
Easily hammering that over with
Hammering
ease.
that over. I want to say
Hammering it.
over. I want
Hammering
to
it.
say over, and I am going to say over, but I wouldn't be surprised by the under based off of how many
Hmm.
games he's going to end up playing.
No, I don't think he's gonna play a very limited amount of games. I think he's finally gonna be back healthy. He's gonna be, he's had his power back for a while now. I think he's easily gonna hit 35, probably around 35 home runs this season.
That could put him into MVP candidacy too, because it's going to be hard to take that away from Ronald Acuna. And now we have Shohei Ohtani in the NL, or one
You
of the
mean
other
Pete
Dodgers
Rose?
players. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the new age Pete Rose. All
Yeah.
right, so Trey Turner over under 23.5 home runs.
I'll go over on that as well. I mean, he flashed a lot of power for a good bit last season. I think he can get over 23 and a
I'm going to
half.
go over slightly, like 24, 25, 26 home runs. And I think no World Baseball Classic and a little bit more stamina in the tank is going to be able to get it. And he's somebody that plays a lot of games as well. Your boy, Kyle Schwarber, over under 39.5 home runs.
I'm going under. I think 3 consecutive years of at least 40 home runs is very, very hard to do. So not to take anything away from Schwarber, I just think it would be very difficult for him to do a third straight season, so I'm gonna go under.
I agree with that, but if he's batting leadoff, he's going to have the most at bats on the team, so there is a good chance that he could get there if the power stays the same. But I'm going to go under just based off of what you just said. You took the words out of my mouth. So next we got Zach Wheeler over or under 13.5 wins.
You know what? Going back on what I said, 2 points that I said previously, I said Zach Wheeler is the only pitcher I have confidence in, and the offense is going to be very, very good. I'm going to say over. With the combination of Zach Wheeler pitching lights out and the offense being as good as I think it's going to be, I'm definitely taking that over.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over as well. I think he's going to, just build off of what he's already done in Philadelphia, and I think it seems like he gets better with age. He ages like fine wine. You know what I mean? So I think they're going to give him enough run support in those outings, and I think he's going to have another stellar year and put himself in the Cy Young race. Next, we're going to go to the number 2 pitcher, Aaron Nola, over under 11.5 wins.
How many did he have last year? I think that
I
one's a
think it
bit
was
tough
right
for
around
me.
11 or 12.
Yeah. Aaron Nola is also the Cole Hamels type where he just never finds himself with any run support. Um,
And by the way, Aaron Nola is not starting opening day for the first time in a long while. Zach Wheeler is
yeah.
actually going to be on the mound for opening day. So
I think that's tough because I mean, to be on a winning team and to be a quality pitcher, usually finish with around 11, 12 wins. I think I'm gonna say slightly over, but I don't have a lot of confidence in that
I
statement.
think he's literally going to get beat by half a win. I think it's going to be
I
right
could
around
see
like
that
10
as
or
well. I
11.
could see him finishing with 11, 12 wins.
All right. Trey Turner, over or under 27.5 stolen bases.
I'm gonna say under. You don't really see guys stealing that often. I don't think he stole very effectively last year, but it wasn't that often. I'm gonna stay under.
I'm going to actually take the over, and I think that's going to be something that he does in his game to improve the Philadelphia offense. And I think he's going to get over 30 stolen bases, and they're going to put an emphasis on him getting 30 stolen bases. All right, next we have Bryce Harper, over under 97.5 RBIs.
Mm. Um, I'm gonna say under. Not take anything away from him. He's never really finished with a very high RBI total in his career as a Philly. I'm gonna say slightly under on that one.
I am going to take the under, and I think he's going to hit in the 90s of RBIs, but I wouldn't be surprised if his RBIs actually hits the over and his homers hit the under, and they're very close to each other in
Yeah, I mean,
those two
I could
cases.
really see any possible outcome there. I think he'll be floating around 90 RBI. I wouldn't be surprised if he surpasses 97, but if I had to pick one, I'm taking under.
And lastly, with one RBI less as the over under, Kyle Schwarber, over under 96.5 RBIs. These are all of these player
Hmm.
props too, by the way, are minus 110 pick'ems both ways, over or under, just for
See,
some clarity.
the reason I kind of like Kyle Schwarber over under is with Schwarber batting leadoff, he has some on base hitters behind him. He has those back of the lineup, get on base, steal a couple bases, guys. I I, I might have to say over on that one.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the over just because if he gets close to that home run total, he's definitely gonna hit the RBI total. So, I mean, what was it? He had like 47 home runs last year and 94 RBIs, which he should have had like 110 or something. But also batting leadoff, that's what does it. But I think throughout the lineup, the offense might be better. You might have more opportunities to knock some runs in with the bottom of the order being a little bit better than it was last season. So, um, I'm gonna take the over.
All right. Well, one more thing on the topic of sports betting and over unders, something I should have brought up during our Sixers talk. As many of you know, Tobias Harris finished his game today with 24 points and a victory. So that means for his next game, hammer that under. If you
What do you
know
think it's gonna be set
Tobias,
at, like 17 and a half, 18 and a half?
I know going not going into today, but going into the previous game, he was at 16 and a half. I know at one point this season, I bet his under at 19 and a half. He finished with 20 points. I'm still upset about that. But yeah, I
Yeah, beat
mean
Central.
Tobias coming off a big game, he's due for that under. So if you want a good parlay leg for the next upcoming Sixers game, take the Tobias Harris under in points. And that's
All right.
my final closing statement tonight.
Alrighty, that does it for the Paisan picks and the Paisan Sports podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in after the long layoff. We're going to be consistently podcasting for now and the foreseeable future. Thank you to Elevation 5280 Sports for letting us present on their platform, and we'll see you guys next week.